This first video is on how to declare and create arrays and array lists and some of the details of doing that. So there are really two types of variables that we're going to focus on. We're going to focus on arrays and array lists. Each one is a collection. And so the picture that you should have in your memory or in your mind is something like this, where you've got a chunk of memory allocated that is able to hold many things, and each unit has an index, and that index is used to locate the objects that are in the collection. And so if I want to declare an array, I would say something, say it's an array of integers, I would say integer, and then square brackets to indicate that it's an array of integers and not just one integer. And then I give it the variable name, my array. Okay? So this is what we refer to as a declaration. And a declaration of the variable always has the variable type and then the variable name. And we've studied a lot of different types. An integer is one type. We could also declare an array of ints. Int, array, my other array. We could declare an array of strings. String, array, some array. We give them just about any name that we want, except that names cannot begin with a number. Names cannot have spaces or special characters. You can put underscores in them. You can put dollar signs in them. But you cannot put quotation marks or apostrophes or semicolons in them, because those special characters have meaning in Java already. You cannot put a number at the beginning of a variable, but you can put the number somewhere in the middle of the variable, my to array, okay? It's usually frowned upon. Underscores you'll see a lot. Dollar signs you'll see sometimes in the beginning of a variable name, but not very often. We tend to always call variables starting with a lowercase letter. And so whenever you declare a variable, it's always the type of the variable and then the variable name. We typically can then end it with a semicolon. If you want to declare it as an array, you put square brackets. So that's the declaration of the variable. And if I want to initialize the variable, I can say something like my array is equal to a new integer array of some particular size, of size, say, 15, or even of size 0. Now, of size 0 is a funny array because it's an array that can't hold anything. And I don't know why a person would do that, but it is perfectly valid. It just can't hold anything. But array of size 15. And before I get much further, I would like to talk about some of the differences between arrays and array lists. So each has an advantage and a disadvantage. So an array has fixed size. So already we're seeing when we create the array, when we set aside memory for it, we have to give it a number. We have to tell it how many items that particular array is going to hold. And so when that memory is set aside, if we say 15 is going to be big enough to hold 15 items. Now this one, I can see the biggest index is 13, so it must hold 14 items. That's the first item. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. The biggest valid index is 13, even though it holds 14 items. So to declare an array of this size, or, well, okay, to create an array of this size, I would say new integer 14. And so that would be create an array that is big enough to hold 14 integers. And you might also look and see here that I'm using integer and I'm using int. And what's the difference? Well, integer is an object. Int is a basic data type. Whenever you hold an object in a variable, it's held by reference. The variable only holds an address, and it holds the address of the actual object. When we create this new array of integers, we don't actually have any integers yet. This array, it holds a bunch of, is filled up with null. What is null? Null is the address to an object that doesn't yet exist, or you can think of it as a bad address, or an address to nothing. Okay, so when you create an array that holds objects, it is immediately filled up with a bunch of addresses, but you don't have the objects yet. So those addresses are all null, or they're addresses to nothing. However, when you initialize it to int, a basic data types are held directly. We're not holding addresses here, we're holding the data directly. So if it's an array of ints, Java will initialize all those locations to be 0. And I'm not going to type all those in, but you get the idea. If it's an array of ints, or if it's an array of doubles, it'll initialize them all to 0. Whenever you get in Java a bunch of basic data types, it initializes them to some set value. When you create an array of objects, each location has null. So back to the difference between arrays and array lists. Arrays can hold basic data types, those data types that are held directly. But array lists can only hold objects. So, how do I create an array list? Well, if I declare an array list, I just want to say array list, and then inside of angle brackets, I tell it what kind of data I'm holding. Okay, so that declares the variable myArrayList as being an array list that will hold integers. And you notice that when I created my array of integers, I see myArray is a variable that can hold an array of integers, and I stuck an array of integers in that variable. Okay, so this creates the array of integers. If I said new array of, say, string, Java is going to complain. It's going to say, hey, look, there's a type mismatch. You declared that variable as being an array of integers, but now you're creating an array of strings and trying to stick it in that variable, and it doesn't like that. So it's telling you got to fix something. You've either got to change the type of the variable, or you've got to change the type of the actual array that you created in memory. Okay, and the same thing with arrays, array lists. The types have to match. Now, when I first create an array list, I have to import array list. I don't have to import anything for an array. So this declares the variable, but I don't actually have an array in memory yet. I've just got a variable that is declared as being of this particular type. If I want to create the array, I can say my array list equals some new array list of type integer. This will create the array list, but you'll notice that I did I need round brackets there. But you'll notice that I did something a little bit different here. I didn't give it a size. Why not? Okay, this is because array lists can grow or shrink. Since arrays are a fixed size, when I first create it, I have to tell it the size, because and then that array will never change size again. But an array list can grow or shrink. So when I first create it, I'll just create it of size 0, and then add to it as I feel like, whenever I feel like. So it makes array lists a lot more flexible in that they can grow and shrink. However, they can only hold objects. If I try to create an array list of type int, I say array list of type int. basic array list. Java won't let me do this. It says syntax error. So array lists can only hold objects. Arrays can hold either objects or basic data types. Being able to hold a basic data type makes arrays much more efficient. So if you implement your program two different ways, one using an array list, and you implement it also using an array, the version that was implemented using array will run much, much more quickly. Now, it will be easier to implement with an array list. And most things happen, as quick as, you push your button and the computer's done before you get your finger off the button. So then you just implement it the easy way. But some things require a lot of computer processing, and if your computer is kind of taken a while to do something, you might decide, okay, well, this needs to be optimized. I need to make it more efficient, so I'm going to change my implementation from an array list implementation to an array implementation. The other thing that array lists give you a lot of flexibility, they implement the collections interface. And there are things that we can do with the collections interface that we cannot do if we don't have it implemented. And let me look at the length of this video. 11 minutes. Okay, let's look at that. Now, I haven't talked a lot about implements, and we won't until later until next semester, essentially. But if I use something like collections, you can always look it up in the Java API. And I know the Java API can be intimidating, but let's just take some of the intimidation out of it. I'm going to go to www.google.com. And I'm going to say Java collections. And see what comes up. See, the first one is a trail, and it's at docs.org. It's a tutorial. I don't really want to look at the tutorial. The other one is at docs.oracle.com. This is the API, and this is specifically the part that is for collections. So there's really two ways to get at this. You can either go that way, or you can type in Java API and look at the whole thing. When you're looking at the whole thing, this is your list of all classes. If I do a Control F, hold down Control, tap the F button, I can find something quickly, and I type in collections. And over here, it'll scroll down to it. And if you're using Firefox, you can see, or this is Google Chrome, you can see that it's highlighted in the scroll bar. If I then click on collections, I get exactly the same thing I saw before, except now I've got this list of things that I can skip to. These are the different things you can do with collections, and one of the really powerful things is sort. It's often really powerful to be able to sort things, or shuffle them, or rotate them, okay, or reverse order, flip the order of them. So I'm going to look at sort. If I create an array of integers, an array list of integers, say I've got this array list of integers and I want to add a bunch of things to it. I'm going to say my array list dot add, and we'll add a 12. And then my array list dot add 6, and my array list dot add 25. Okay, and we could add more, but let's just see what happens here if I say system.out.println my array list. We'll run this and see what happens. Oh, I've got errors in here. I'm just going to comment that out. I can see the things in the order that I put them in. So it's added the 12, then the 6, and then the 25. So I've got the 12, then the 6, and then the 25. One really useful thing that I can do with an array list that I cannot do with an array so easily is I can say collections dot sort my array list. So if I sort it and then print it out, and you notice what happened if I printed it and then sorted it. If I print it before it's sorted or without sorting it, it adds them in the same order. They're all in the same order that I added them. The first one went at index 0, the second one went at index 1, and the third one ended up at index 2. And now I sort it and then print it, and they're all in order from smallest to biggest. Now, that may not seem like a whole lot if there are only 3 items, but if you've got 100 items, to just be able to say collections.sort, pass it the array list, and now everything in that array list is in order, that's huge. That's really powerful. So this video is about as long as I wanted it to be. And my main thing that I wanted to cover in this video is how to declare and initialize arrays and array lists and some of the differences between them. So the square bracket notation when you're declaring, for an array, you say the type that is holding and then square brackets, and all of a sudden it's an array of that type. An array list, you say array list and then angle brackets, and inside of the angle brackets, the kind of object that is holding. And array lists can only hold objects. Arrays can hold basic data types. And then so this is the declaration, and then the initialization when you actually create the array or array list in memory. For an array list, you say new array list and then the angle brackets. So really, this part looks just like this part. And then you just have to add the keyword new at the beginning and the round brackets at the end. Okay? When you're creating the new array, you still add the new at the beginning, and then this part looks similar, except instead of round brackets, now you put a number, because an array is a fixed size, so you have to tell it how many objects are in the array. So that's declaration and initialization of arrays and array lists. Thank you.